Hello and welcome to Politics Today, and in this programme we'll be asking, what does President-elect Biden mean for the special relationship between Britain and the United States? And joining me in this programme today, I'm joined by Hugh Kitson, who's a documentary filmmaker, famous for the film Whose Land, as well as Melanie Simmons, the editor of Heart newspaper. So thank you for both being in this programme. I'll start off with Hugh. I mean, politics couldn't get any more interesting, could it? When we see the US presidential elections, the fallout from it, and now that Britain's in this very unique position where previously they had in President Trump an Anglophile who loved everything British, and now we have only the second ever elected Irish American president who's not too fond of Britain, let's say, and we want a trade deal from him and we want closer relationships. So in your opinion, what does this mean for the special relationship with Biden and as President of the United States and Great Britain as well?
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult, actually. I think there's much more to it than just the relationship between their president and our prime minister. I think there's actually, if I can put it this way, a spiritual battle going on. I believe the thing that is at stake is the Judeo-Christian heritage of America and Britain, and also the desire for certainly Biden and much of the world for globalization, and the two are in conflict with one another.
Absolutely. Melanie, great to have you on the news, on Politics Today. I suppose when we look at it, I think Hugh's made a very, very important point that really what we're looking at is a battle between nationalism and national sovereignty and globalism. And the fact that the previous occupant of the White House is still president, how long he will continue to be president, we don't know because obviously there's lots of court cases going on right now. But the main issue really is that President Trump was doing the same thing as Brexit represented. So Trump took America out of the globalist institutions and put American interests first. And that's also what Brexit represented, Britain coming out of the European Union and having our own sovereignties and our own laws. So how does this tie up now with the Democrat President Biden and the special relationship, knowing that he's pro-EU, he's pro these big globalist institutions such as the UN, the World Health Organization, International Monetary Fund, and other big global organizations?
Well, I completely agree with Hugh. It's really not looking good. It depends how you see things. If you think, oh, good, things are hurtling along and we might see Jesus sooner. But on the other hand, those of us who are still here are sort of thinking, eek. In terms of special relationship, there's going to be a lot of adjustment needed. I had heard that Boris Johnson's team already had people talking to the Biden team to try and pave the way in case, as an insurance policy. I don't think anyone believed it would really happen. And as we speak, the jury is still out, literally the jury perhaps. And we simply don't know, because some people think if Biden does carry on, become duly elected as president, that will take us back to 2015. He's already got Obama openly alongside him, encouraging him, and will presumably closely align his policies to Obama's. So there'll be a step back into the Paris Climate Accords, even though Trump was a conservationist and did a lot to keep America's green spaces nice for families and clean, but he didn't buy into the CO2 theory. And as is what's been pointed out is that other so-called climate deniers or CO2, anti-CO2 leaders, such as the Australian Prime Minister and President Bolsonaro of Brazil, are going to be somewhat out in the cold and isolated. Both of them, as far as I understand, are Christians, and President Trump was certainly believed in God, and as far as we know, he was a Christian, although he didn't always act like a churchgoer or appear to, and that's what got him a lot of approbation. But certainly Mike Pence, who's his number two, is one, and other members of the administration.
Absolutely. And when we look at it, what's at stake here? I mean, as I said earlier, that Joe Biden is only the second Catholic to ever hold office in the United States. His predecessor would have been JFK. And so therefore his views on Britain are pretty much tainted. He supports United Ireland. And this is going to be a big problem, isn't it, in terms of Brexit and the issue of Northern Ireland. And really, when we think about it, where is the last strong bastion of our Judeo-Christian heritage in Europe? It's in Northern Ireland. So isn't there a prospect that with Joe Biden being president, that he will demand more concessions are made to ensure that Ireland becomes a united Ireland under Catholic rule and governed by Dublin?
Yeah, I believe that's absolutely right, and we could well see the United Kingdom as four countries within one actually disintegrate, and it is a very real problem. And again, I think we come back to this whole thing of globalization, because the European Union itself is a globalist organization, and the whole ethos of nation states is actually being eroded into one global thing. And it's not only that, if you take it to its logical conclusion, you'd find an organization like the United Nations actually governing the world. And if you study the prophetic scriptures, one world government is the thing that we're all going to face one of these days before the Lord returns. And in fact, he comes to deliver us from that.
Melanie, we have to ask, hasn't Boris Johnson and his predecessor, Theresa May, really missed an opportunity to build a very strong relationship with the United States whilst President Trump was in power for the last 4 years? And surely over those 4 years, Britain could have had a very, very good trade deal. But surely we've now missed out on that opportunity, haven't we? And what does this mean for Brexit, essentially?
Well, not necessarily, because to some extent, with where we are going with the EU negotiations, we didn't think that, so I understand that we're actually free to go ahead and make deals. And I think that I just want to actually say something in the light of what Hugh was saying, and you were saying about the Irish question, because recently a photo has emerged of President-elect Biden within the last 2-3 years or something, posing with Gerry Adams and a lady who had fled bail to the US, who had tried to kill a British Army officer. And to be photographed with them as if they're sort of brave freedom fighters, it is exquisitely insensitive to the special relationship.
Yes.
It really is a slap in the face to all the people who are murdered, maimed, killed, to do that. But going back to the EU trade deal, one article I read said that it won't be so bad for the chickens because Biden might not be so keen on doing the chlorinated chickens, and we may not be forced to do that. But having said that, he won't be so keen on bending over backwards for us, and Trump was going to be very generous.
And Hugh, when we look back at history, we look at the special relationship, and over the 20th century in particular, that special relationship came to the fore. It was American help during the First World War that helped to break the stalemate against German imperialism. Then we saw America come in late into the Second World War. But if they didn't get involved in the Second World War, then I question how long as a nation we could have held out against the Nazi aggression, maybe only for a couple of years or a few years more, no more than that. So we have the Americans to thank for the liberation of Europe under Nazi tyranny. And then we saw America come to the fore during the Cold War as well by preventing Soviet expansionism. And now it seems like the special relationship won't be a special relationship with Biden-elect and Boris Johnson. So isn't this a tragedy for the way that God has used our two nations so powerfully on the world stage?
I think it is a very real tragedy. But I have to say, Biden is not in the White House yet. And I think that as Christians, this is something that we can actually pray about, because it comes back to the preservation, at least for a time, because we know that things are going to get really bad, preservation of our Judeo-Christian heritage. And by the way, it's very interesting, Winston Churchill, as a young man, he was given a vision that one day, and this is back in around 1890, that he would be in a position to save Britain. And the reason why he was so strong against the Nazis was he knew it would destroy, the Nazis would destroy the Judeo-Christian heritage of the Western world. And I believe that that is something that is very significant. And Trump, I believe, wanted to do the very same thing. As a complete contrast to that, I remember that Tony Blair and Bill Clinton were very close allies, and they were very, both of them globalists too. And I remember going to a Labour Party conference. I hang my hands in shame, but I didn't go there because I wanted to. I went there with a group of people to man a Christian Friends of Israel stand. And I remember, because this was just before the Iraq War of 2003, and in order to shore up his intention to join with George W. Bush in invading Iraq, he brought Bill Clinton over to soften up the Labour Party members. And I remember going into Bill Clinton's speech, and there's something he repeated 3 times. He said, as nations, we have come from independence to interdependence. The next step which we must do is come from interdependence to integration. And he said that 3 times. Wow. During the course of his 1-hour speech. The media never actually commented on that at the time. But this is where this is taking us. And at the moment, we're trying to retain our sovereignty, whereas Biden and Obama and Clinton before them are trying to take the world in a completely different direction. And so I believe that we can, even now, with allegations of fraud in the election that took place, we as Christians can pray that justice is done. And God is a God of truth and justice. And as Christians, I believe we can pray into this.
Absolutely. And, you know, just seeing the US presidential elections and having done a lot of programs on it, realizing what's at stake, there is a kind of feeling of sadness and sorrow. The fact that what President Trump represented and what his administration, I should say more of what his administration represented rather than himself, was the defending of Christian religious freedom, defending the unborn, and President Trump himself spoke up and defended the unborn in the UN Security Council. We also see that he was a great defender of Israel and the Jewish people. Also protected Christian being persecuted across the world. and effectively allowed prayer and intercession and recognized that above him was God and he was sovereign. And yet what we have now is, and it's only a question of time really to see how long Joe Biden will be president with ultra-liberal progressive in Kamala Harris ready to step in the wings, that comes with a very, very dangerous and sinister agenda. So is this the end of Christian freedoms in the West? With Biden in power?
Not quite, but it won't be looking good. Apparently there were 35 million Christians who voted for President Trump to stay another 4 years in the White House. I don't think they're going to be going anywhere very quickly, and they are being urged to pray, like Hugh was saying. It concerns me very much, as you say, because about Christian persecution, because President Trump apparently got the president of Nigeria in his office, and when everyone had gone, he said to him, "Why are you killing Christians?" Face to face, you know, and I think his name is Bukhara, and he sort of stammered and sort of said, "Oh, well, it's cultural, you know, that we kill Christians, okay?" But at least he was challenged. Now, I can't imagine President Biden doing that, because there will be the undertext, the subtext that Christians are extremists and therefore they have to expect this. And it might even transfer to US society now, because they won't be inclusive enough, they won't be accepting enough. I don't know what he will allow to go through, but would they reach the stage in America? We've already seen it with some governors during the lockdown cracking down hard on Christians. Andrew Womack the other night was expecting to be arrested while he gave an election night service, and people, you know, a prayer service. Was the governor going to send the police in? This was in the West, the democracy, and it was as if there was already a sense amongst the darker forces that they now have the freedom to really start showing themselves, and that the good old days were gone.
And Hugh, we know very much in the issue that this is a huge spiritual battle, and it always has been, because of the two parallel opposites that President Trump and his administration represent, and that of the Democrats with their secular humanism, abortion at birth effectively, and implementing global institutions and surrendering American sovereignty as well. Do you think that we're seeing almost the end of the concept of the nation state in the days in which we're living in which now, as you discussed that with your speech that you heard by Clinton, that nations have to be interdependent upon each other, rather than actually be free and independent states to make their own decisions and their own choices and their own laws and being able to govern for themselves?
Yes, I think it's definitely going that way. And this is really the reason why we're getting out of the European Union, because certainly the European Union itself is heading that way, if indeed it survives. But this is something that is, and I believe it is actually really leading to the one supreme world leader, who I believe will be a secular humanist. I should say that the other thing that we need to be wary of, and it's very interesting that Biden courted these people in his election campaign, is the possibility of Islamic globalization. And both of these, secular humanism and Islamic globalization, are anti-Christ regimes. Very interesting chapter in Daniel, chapter 10, where it mentions the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece. Iran is certainly it not only wants to control the Middle East. If they had the opportunity, they'd be controlling the world as well. And so at the moment, you've got the globalists supporting Iran with their nuclear program and so on, But there'll come a time, I believe, when there'll be conflict there too.
Absolutely. So in terms of foreign policy, I mean, there is a clear marked distinction between President Trump and President-elect Biden. He's already talking about renewing the Iran deal and stopping the sanctions on Iran and entering into cooperation with the Iranian regime, despite the fact that he's determined to have nuclear weapons. The other issue as well, of course, we know is Israel on wanting to support the Palestinian leadership and refund the Palestinian Authority and go back to the failed model of the two-state solution, and international cooperation, stronger ties with the European Union. And it looks like all that President Trump has achieved in the last 4 years is just going to be completely thrown away, and the world will become a less safer place, an actual more dangerous place. But the world's media and the nations of the world seem much happier with a Democrat president than they do with a Republican president. What are your thoughts?
Yes, the media is unbelievable. They've been so plugging Biden since the beginning. I phoned the BBC twice to complain because they keep saying in their headlines that President Trump was making unsubstantiated claims, whereas the internet was awash with it. I mean, you had to actually only go as far as Australia virtually to see Sky News, Rudy Giuliani speaking there and giving evidence and talking about the evidence they're going to be presenting. So if you are one of the people who still think the BBC is the state broadcaster and is right and true, it's sadly not true. I felt quite extra discouraged last few days. Beforehand I could cope with it, and now I feel even less so. And in terms of foreign policy, I do think it'll either, if President Biden does if he does become President Biden, then I think America is going to rapidly decline economically. Already telling people to wear a mask, and he's got this big green agenda as well. None of it is going to be restricting people and restricting their environmental activities. Isn't going to be good for the economy at all. So if he does stay in, I think America's really going to decline quite fast, possibly held back by the Senate. And in terms of international relations, yes, he'll be very cosy with the EU. He probably will be fairly frosty with Russia. He'll probably be cosy with China. He may remove Trump's tariffs. It really, he's very much part of the system. And if he becomes president, my only hope is that after 4 years, things will be so bad that everyone will vote a Republican back in who will try to get things back on an even keel.
Yeah, I don't know what the world will be like by 2024. You have to make an interesting thing. When it comes to politics and when it comes to government and when it comes to our Prime Minister, the government have to act in the national interests. And it makes you think, why didn't the British government act in the national interest when President Trump was in power? They could have strengthened the transatlantic relationship between Britain and the United States, having an Anglophile in the White House, could have got an extremely good trade deal, which meant that Brexit could have been a success. And now we're looking at a situation where they failed to do that. We've seen President Biden allegedly win the US presidential elections. There will be no special relationship. There will be, and this goes against the national interest. So the question is, has the British media been working against British national interests? And have our politicians and our government been so stupid to follow that line?
Well, I think a couple of things. The whole Brexit debate was very toxic and actually really distracted the government from doing what could have been done. And then, of course, in this year, 2020, the government has been very much consumed by the COVID-19 crisis. And so, yes, an opportunity has been missed, but I don't think you can necessarily blame the government for neglecting that. And of course, Trump himself has been pretty distracted. And yes, an opportunity has been missed. But if I can be an optimist, I don't believe actually that Trump's work has been finished. And as I said earlier, I think our prayer should be that we get a respite of another 4 years, where we can work while it is day before the night descends upon us.
And Melanie, we're down to the last 3 minutes of the programme, and really want to sum up really. So, I mean, what we're seeing by these incredible events is that, we know that Revelation really, that we're now knocking at the door. And we're not too far away probably from the tribulation period, as we see that democracies around the world are imploding, nations are now no longer able to govern. And are we seeing, with the end of the special relationship, really the end of democracy, the end of Christian freedoms, religious freedoms that are so cherished and been fought for centuries, now about to be disappear, essentially?
Well, I think it's already started, because with the measures taken against COVID-19, this virus condition, the measures taken have already so eroded our freedoms that we fought for. Paul Girvan, the Northern Ireland DUP member, spoke to the Christian People's Alliance conference recently, and he said that he felt a lot of the statistics were quite highly questionable, and he was very concerned that freedoms that we had fought for were being eroded, and that's the same in every country around the world. Well, almost every country as far as I'm aware of it. So apart from the countries where they didn't have the freedom, and it's not much different. The only difference being you can't go outside your front door now. But we are seeing this for the first time, and it started months ago. I mean, it started in terms of what we could say and not say a few years ago, but it's started physically in terms of our freedom to worship, which we've been very spoilt with for decades, suddenly being taken away. And I mean, the other day I was with a Salvation Army team on Remembrance Sunday, and we were aware that it would be illegal to even meet in the car park and sing our God, oh God, our help in ages past.
And that's the difference, I think, between this government and President Trump, who wanted to open up the churches to get people to pray, because he realised also not only the health of the nation was at stake, but the spiritual health of the nation is at stake. Very quickly, in 30 seconds, Hugh, as Christians, how can we pray for what's happening, and how can we pray for the special relationship between Britain and the United States of America?
Well, really, as I said earlier, God is a God of justice. He's a God of truth. And if there has been fraud, it contradicts both of those. And so therefore, that's how we need to pray, that God exercises truth and justice.
Amen. So Hugh, Melanie, thank you so much for being my guest on Politics Today. I want to thank you all for watching today's programme. We need to continue to pray for those in office, whether it's the United States or here, and realise that this special relationship is extremely important. So thank you for watching Politics Today.